So it is now 6:30, and this is Monday, the 27th of March, and this is the opening of the Norton Conservation Commission. And as is required, because this meeting is remote, we need to read the governor's preamble. So, Dan, if you start with that.
Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Norton Conservation Commission will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found at the end of the agenda. Members of the public attending this meeting, attending this public hearing / meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by raising their hand virtually or pressing *9 if participating by phone. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Norton Cable website, www.nortonmediacenter.org, an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting.
Thank you, Dan. So participating tonight, we have John Thomas, our director, Megan Harrop, our assistant, and the members of the commission here tonight are myself, Julian Kadish, chair, Lisa Carosa, vice chair, Dan Pearson, Mark Fernandez, and Ron O'Reilly. Tom Avest could not join us tonight, and unfortunately we still have one vacancy on the commission. So our first item on the agenda is a new public hearing, file number 250-1124, notice of intent, 301 South Worcester Street, for proposed work to construct a total of 5 single-family dwellings. Do we have a representative of the applicant who wants to present?
You sure do, Mr. Chairman. This is Scott Goddard, wetland scientist from Goddard Consulting. How are you this evening?
I am good, and yourself?
Doing well, thank you. I'm here tonight.
You may want to share your screen.
I would love to share my screen, sure thing. It says that the host has disabled participant screen sharing, so I'll need that allowance granted to me.
That might cost you.
You're all set, Scott.
Okay. Perfect. All right. All right. I assume, can you all see that?
Yes.
Perfect.
We can.
It seems to have given me admission skills to new people coming in too, so I just let somebody in to your meeting.
I don't know if it's going to happen, so
okay.
I apologize.
If I see that, I'll just let them in, I guess. So I am Scott Goddard, Goddard Consulting, professional wetlands consultant, representing the owner and applicant. In this case is the Marsha Godfrey estate. The property is located at 301 South Worcester Street. We have a DEP file number 250-1124. So I'm showing you this presentation view first. I got 3 graphics to demonstrate tonight. And we also have Nick Fasandola from Level Design Group on the call. He's the civil engineer. So as we walk through this presentation, I'll tell you what I'm going to show you and what I'm not going to show you, and then what sort of I anticipate moving forward. I'm going to show you a slide of how we're proposing this property is subdivided from its current status. Number 2, I'm going to show you a slide of the existing conditions and that's namely the results of an ANRAD that was done about a year ago. Site plans for the civil engineering purposes, those, for some more of a high level graphical presentation, and then we'll kind of go from there. There have been 3 peer review, for lack of a better term, responses that came to us late last week. One was from your agent, John Thomas. One was a letter from your technical peer review consultant for the stormwater management. And the third was some DEP comments. So those are kind of fresh off the presses. We don't have prepared responses to those this evening. So this is more of an introductory hearing to get the process rolling, to take any additional comments from the commission. And then we anticipate a continuation to the next meeting to prepare those responses. So this property here in total is approximately 30 acres in size. It's bounded by South Worcester Street, John Scott Boulevard, house with a crossing, so that might orient you for that. There's a pond out behind it that's a notable. Mrs. Godfrey recently passed away, and her estate is pursuing this application, which is really her adult children, to recoup some value on the rear of the property while keeping the large farm estate in its full intact. So what you see on the upper right-hand part of the property is about a 17-acre farm site with a lot of open fields, and that is the current dwelling residence of descendants of the Godfrey family. Then we have these 5 A&R, approval not required lots, shown on the Dean Street and John Scott Boulevard side of the site. They're separated from the other part of the site by wetland resource. Reduce any impact to wetland resource areas. So I'm excited to present this program to you tonight. I think it's a good plan. I think it meets the regulatory performance standards, protects all the interests of the Wetland Protection Act. And as we work through the questions and answers at a subsequent meeting, I hope to alleviate any questions the commission and its agents might have. So a review of existing conditions. Now I'm zooming in on that left-hand side of the property, right? So if you think back to that last one, I'm no longer showing you that the existing farmland on the upper right side. We're just dealing with the A&R lots. This map here shows the resource areas we're dealing with. An ANRAD was done confirming the boundaries of these resource areas. So what you see is what you get and has already been thoroughly peer reviewed and issued an ORAD that's still valid by the commission. The green hatched areas are bordering vegetated wetlands. On the right-hand side here are BVW areas associated with that pond, which is largely on the other part of the site. Over here, and the larger BVW here. The pink is 25 feet off of the edge of the green, largely bank. The yellow is 100-foot buffer zone. As you go to the northern part of the site, The site is bounded by Goose Branch River. That's the blue outlined here. Goose Branch River is a perennial stream and flows from the left side of the stream to the right side of the stream, kind of in this direction from west to east. And then there's a secondary small perennial stream, presumptively as mapped, coming out of the pond and flowing to the north. So this stream flows in this direction. They converge at this point where my cursor is and flows then off-site to the north and heads away from the subject area. We have the light blue line is the 100-foot inner riparian zone. Zero to 100 feet. That is in this zone right in here to meet those standards. And then between 100 and 200 feet, regulatory standard of no adverse impact under 10.584D, which is new construction standards, we're limited to only 10% of that area being altered. So we have to look at this, all of this riverfront area, and we can only alter up to 10% of it to show that we're not having an adverse impact on the interest of riverfront. That's exclusive of stormwater management features as well. So when you look at that, we're largely then focused in on this area right in here for, so for development purposes, where we want to keep the development outside of 25 feet from the wetland to respect the local policy. We want to keep the work largely out of the outer riparian zone, only encroaching in it up to that 10% number. And then we have this little area as well over here. John Scott Boulevard. So when I see these old farmer crossings that have restriction culverts, I think, aha, here's an opportunity for improving an existing wetland crossing, not making a new crossing, and taking what is often an undersized culvert that doesn't satisfy stream crossing standards and improving that for hydrologic and wildlife connectivity through the site with a more appropriate stream crossing standards application for a driveway. Furthermore, you can see why this wetland layout lends itself to a shared driveway as opposed to several individual driveways to avoid wetland impact. So the wetlands really are driving the development and layout and design of the site. This is the proposed design plan. What this is a simplified, Crayola crayon level, but still accurate representation of what is depicted in the more detailed civil engineering plans, but I think is appropriate for our introductory level discussion this evening. So of the 5 lots, we'll go kind of left to right, I guess. This is the standards. We then look at these 4 lots that are kind of more clustered together. One single crossing, but we're proposing actually tearing out the crossing and putting in a new box culvert that will open up the openness ratios and bank full width spanning for this single access shared driveway. So we're excited about that. There's no BVW alteration with respect to that, just some temporary bank alteration, but there's actually going to be bank restoration insofar as we're going to be able to rebuild the bank inside that box culvert where currently the pipe that's there does not allow for that to happen. These slightly hatched blue areas represent stormwater management features. So as you come in off of John Scott Boulevard, it'll split off here and service 4 single family houses. They're largely clustered into that centrally located area. I didn't point this out earlier, but it's worth noting. We do have a large agricultural field currently on the property up in here. Okay, but that's going to be largely left intact. Temporary alterations for well access surrounded by erosion controls just to put wells in, and then those would be restored. So I would call those temporary riverfront area alterations. We have this stormwater management feature encroaching slightly into the riverfront area, but this actually doesn't, we did count the number in our calculations to get to the 10% max, although the regulations would allow us actually to discount this area because this is for stormwater management. This is a berm that's going to hold back some backwater to temporarily, slowly release the water on site. So we did count that toward the 10%, but in revised calculations, we would have the ability to remove that from our 10% calculations since it's only for stormwater management. And then this house right here is the only thing that encroaches into the riverfront. So that's pretty much it in big picture. I don't think it's necessary to go into more detail on it at this point, but I will say we do have those 3 review comment letters, the DEP comments, John Thomas's email with comments, and then your stormwater management peer reviewer. So we have all 3 of those, and we're expecting to prepare written responses and adjustments as needed in response to those prior to the next hearing. But we did want to have this hearing to get the ball rolling, so I turn it over to the commission for initial observations and comments. Thank you.
Scott, just a couple of questions. So the wells for the 2 houses that don't show the spurs, the one off of Dean Street and the other one adjacent, those are contained within the outline of the limited work. Is that correct? That
is correct. Yes, sir. That's right. And the reason for that we needed the spurs in this particular case was to create you need 100-foot separation to septic systems. Yep, we are mapped in an ACEC. So there's an area right in here that is a mapped PVP on the layers. I haven't evaluated it yet. I intend to. I would expect that it does function as a vernal pool. It was determined to be non-jurisdictional during the time of the ANRAD in that it doesn't hold a sufficient amount of water to qualify as isolated land subject to flooding. But nevertheless, rather than just discounting it altogether, we were intentional on the design to avoid any direct alteration to that area with the presumption that it is still a wildlife habitat feature on the site. So the design was moved around any of that area, though it's not a resource area in and of itself. There was a second small isolated vegetated wetland, somewhere right in about here where my cursor is, if you can see that. Can you guys see my cursor if I move it around like this? Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
So there's a small IVW in here. It's very, very small. I'm going to start by going out there and seeing what's what and what's where out there, so we understand if that is in fact the case. So we should be the commission at subsequent meeting.
Okay, when you calculated, so if you go back to the first sketch, when you did the riverfront, I'm just curious as to what's going to happen to that existing house. I'm sorry, go back one more. So does the riverfront area extend onto that remaining lot?
So this is where Goose Branch River extends. So it kind of would follow this general path of my cursor, kind of like that. So sure, if this little spur right here is also a river, right? A riverfront line would kind of come around like this and then probably go like that. So you'd have this portion of the site would be riverfront area, but it's also largely all BVW in there as well.
Right. So, in the end, what I'm looking for
Yeah, no, that's a fair enough observation for sure. So we'll take a look at that and we'll include some comments about that with our responses.
All right, and I would ask you to look at the grading on the Dean Street lot. It seems like the house is fighting the grade, and it seems like the house wants to be rotated. There's an obnoxious amount of grading, Phil, looks like. So you might want to go to the engineering plan if you have it, and just take a peek at that. And then if there are any provisions for snow storage, I'm not seeing the civil plan, so I don't know. And then what's going to happen to that former agricultural field? You plan on revegetating it, or?
We haven't contemplated any alterations to it at this point. So right now we're treating it more or less as new construction because there's no degraded surfaces within this riverfront area. So it does have to meet the new construction standards. So we can talk about the long-term plan with respect to that field, I guess, as this develops.
Correct. So it's going to be somebody's backyard. So unless they have the rototiller out there, I'm sure they're going to want to make it into lawn. So it's something that we're going to.
Percent.
Okay. Thank you.
John, do you have any comments?
I think as long as Goddard Consulting can answer a lot of the questions that I've addressed and member Lisa Carosa has asked tonight, and then also DP, I think we'll have a better presentation in front of us the next time to be able to comment further.
All right. So I think we can go on to members of the audience. If there are any questions among members of the audience, we can take them now. And of course, there will be opportunities to ask questions when there are more details available and the civil engineering plan being available, so we can see more in detail about the construction around the houses.
Well,
So,
we have that. We could show it tonight, Mr. Chairman, but I just don't know if that's going to be a good use of everyone's.
seeing no continuing questions, obviously there's more information that needs to be presented, and is that a reasonable time for this to be continued to?
I'd like to schedule it for then, and if it turns out not to be, we'll request a continuation in advance of that. But yes, please continue to April 10th.
Okay, so unless there are further questions, we can go ahead and entertain a motion for the continuation of this public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Ron and seconded by Lisa, and we'll begin with a roll call vote, starting with Mark and Ron.
Aye.
And then we have Lisa and Dan.
Aye.
All right.
And I'll throw in an aye, so this hearing for 301 South Worcester Street, DP number 250-11. Dean Street, and there was a request for a continuation of this hearing.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Lisa, seconded by Dan. Roll call vote, starting with Lisa and Dan,
Aye.
All right.
and Mark and Ron.
Aye.
And Mark, I don't know if you threw in an aye or not.
Aye, yep.
Yeah, okay, and I'll throw in an aye. So that motion carries. 13 Dean Street hearing is continued until April 10th. Next is 0 East Hodges Street, notice of intent, file number 250-1113. The applicant also requested a continuation until April 10th.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Dan, seconded by Lisa. Roll call vote. starting with-
Julian, there's a hand up.
Be swamped. They were digging the hole. It wasn't, I don't know, 20, 22 inches before that hole swamped out. And they requested, they didn't request it, but they were talking about it, and they're like, well, we're just going to wait for a dry time. They are going to endlessly postpone this until they get the conditions that they want. And that's not right. It's not, I have to come to all these meetings. It's not optional for me. You know, to protect myself, I have to do this. They need to do their stuff in a timely fashion. Now, are they required a certain amount of time where they're allowed to postpone these and stop postponing these?
Mr. Polk, I understand where you're coming from. What's interesting about soils is that they're very indicative. So regardless of whatever time they decide to do the testing, The soils will leave a mark or an impact in the soils to let us know what the conditions are of those soils at different times of the season. So if there is a high water table, there will be, fluctuations, modeling, redoxamorphic features, things of that nature, which will be evident that the soil may not be good for what they're trying to do. So we will know.
Them. Well, it's inconvenient for me. So, I mean, when is enough enough? When do they not have to?
They've asked a continuance. My typical frame of mindset is that 3 continuances in a row, they'll have to come in front of the commission and give us an update. So I think this is continuance number 2. Is this?
I thought it was 3.
Double check me on that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is Scott Goddard. I could chime in here if it would help.
About this particular project, or?
Yeah, because I'm also on this project. So
Okay.
the commission, there was a request. I don't know if it was a request, but about an update. So here's the update. We were exploring on this site whether it makes sense to flip the house and septic location from where it was last designed, and so in order to see if that makes sense to do the flip-flop, where the house was proposed to see if it would dewatered perk test, which is not a typically used methodology, but allowed by Title V, where you can dig a huge moat and kind of drain the water down and do a fancy perk test on effectively an island in your hole. But so that wasn't an option for us. So we're likely going to revert back to the original plan, keep the septic where it's already designed and approved and reviewed, and have suitable testing, and kind of switch the house back and forth. So I anticipate that you'll see this back before you again, quite shortly. I mean, you could call this, if you would like, the update. But Nick Fasandola, who was, I think he's dropped off the meeting now, he from Level Design, he's also the civil engineer on that site as well, and there's not much left to do to bring that. And I think that project will come to a close at the next meeting, because the project has changed a lot. It's been reduced substantially since its initial iterations, and is a fairly modest, impact to a fairly large site at this point. So that's the update I have for you.
But, all right. So if I wasn't here, you'd be doing an update. So you shouldn't be doing an update. Correct?
I wasn't planning on doing an update until...
How many meetings have we gone through so far?
So we've gone through 3 sets of meetings. This is
we're not ghosting on this site. It's a big site. It's a difficult site. We're small project relative to the scale of the site. Happy with the final outcome of this proposal.
So we look forward to seeing new information at the next meeting. Is that
Yes.
correct, Scott?
Yes, it is.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Polk, does that help?
If you say it does, it doesn't for me, but if he's supposedly following the rules.
All right. Well, that's unfortunately the heart of this discussion. Is we've had recently projects before us which are clearly not ideal for anyone to have a house in, but the legal requirements are met and we have no choice. And until the laws are changed, this is unfortunately the reality of developing non-ideal parcels.
No, and I mean, I get that, but again, I have to be prepared at every one of these. I can't call up. Can I call up and say, hey, I can't make this one. I got something going.
Outlines that there's a continuance request. That usually means that we're going to hold a meeting and that person will be an update for said project.
Okay. Like I said, I mean, it's just, I want this to be addressed in a timely fashion. You know, I mean, I endlessly have to follow meetings and it takes up my time, and I just don't think that that's fair. These things should be done in a timely fashion and not just an endless amount of meetings. You know, continuances and everything else. I'm sorry, but I just don't believe in that.
A lot of these site evaluations and a lot of this plan preparation and things of that nature, it does take time. And sometimes there's, people are not able to, spend the funds or the services needed to fulfill those in a timely fashion. And that's why, I rely on the applicants to present the information to us as soon as they can. But, I'm at the discretion of the applicant's ability to provide us that information. And they say that they need more time to do so. So they need more time to do so. And it seems like they've done additional evaluations to try to give it the best go that they can for this site.
I'm not upset with you guys. It's just, I want to find out what's going on once and for all. It's already changed several times. I mean, I know things get updated, things change, things happen and stuff like that. But again, I think the townspeople should also be able to have a say also. But I'll let you continue this.
All right. Thank you for your time, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, so I think the applicant requested a continuation for 0 Hodges Street, and we can now consider a motion for a continuation of this hearing until the 10th of April.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion made by Dan, seconded by Lisa. Roll call vote, starting with Mark and Lisa.
Aye.
Aye.
And Dan and Ron.
Aye. Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye, so the motion carries. Our next hearing is file number 250-1119, notice of intent, 0 South Washington Street.
The development team. I'm relatively new to the project myself. I was not before you a couple of weeks ago at your meeting on March 13th. The meeting on the 13th, we reviewed at that time the updated plans we had. The commission had a number of questions and comments, and I watched the meeting since then, and to be sort of candid, things got a bit cantankerous, I think, as the meeting sort of played out, and I want to offer my apology for that. I think that was us showing a bit of frustration we had with the process, and quite frankly, us not being as prepared as we could have been to respond to the questions that the commission had. As you know, our engineer was in Hawaii at the time, and we simply didn't have the answers to the questions, and some of the things we should have presented to the board at that time were just not ready. So I apologize for that, but I can assure you that we've been working diligently over the past couple of weeks to make significant updates to the plans, which I think will be to the commission's liking. So tonight, maybe in an abundance of caution, we have every member of our development team, Dave Patuk and Barb Fitzgerald are both here. They're traffic consultant. I don't know that the commission's going to have many questions about traffic. That's probably more of a planning issue. We're before the planning board tomorrow night. But again, we wanted, in an abundance of caution, to have all of the members of our project team here tonight, so we can answer any questions that the commission might have. So with that, I will turn it over, I guess, first to Bob Crowell to share the screen and to bring the commission up to speed with respect to the changes that have been made. We've gone through a couple of rounds of revisions in 2 weeks, not only in communication with Mr. Thomas, but also in communication with Maria de la Fuente, the planning director, in the sense that we're also undertaking a review for special permit and site plan approval from the planning board. As I mentioned, we have a continuation of that proceeding until tomorrow night, pending pending our further appearance before you. So, Bob, do you have the ability where you are to share your screen?
I don't. I'm actually using my cell phone. Okay.
Can you see
Okay.
that, Bob?
Yes, I can. Okay.
All right. Let me know if you want me to move it or zoom in any particular areas, and I'll try to do my best to
That's
follow along.
fine for now. There were about 13 points that John made. He sent it to us, and I would just like to run down through them. Over half of them were regarding the wall, and the first thing was the wall details are now shown on sheet 9, and I think it pretty well it shows how the wall's constructed. It shows the details, and I just want to say that.
Can we go to the grading plan while we're looking at this? We're looking at this in one dimension. We need to see the
Okay.
grading plan in the context
The
of
grading
wall.
plan is sheet 4.
Okay, thank you.
And Bob, can I confirm, I know you provided an updated version of sheet 3. The other sheets are all the same.
Okay, go to sheet 4. Okay.
Sheet 4?
Yep.
Sorry, I went right by it. There you go.
Okay. So sheet 4 shows where the wall is. Now, previously we were in the riverfront area. We have pulled the parking lot out of the riverfront area. We are not in the riverfront area now. And the wall, details are on sheet 9. We'll get to that. But when the walls designed on this as shown here, and when the project gets approved, it will be sent to the manufacturer. He has an engineer that will lay it out. And maybe let's go to sheet 9. I can talk about that.
Sure.
It's the last one. There we go. Where it meets the existing grade, and at the top is the basically 12 feet in, and that's exposed to the that you see. Anyway, the building inspector requires a fence along the guardrail, and there's a guardrail right up against the wall, so the parking goes right up against goes pretty close to the edge of the wall, and there's a guardrail there, and where there isn't a guardrail, there's a fence, and they fit right into the wall. They make a space for the wall. They set it in there, and they pour concrete around it and hold it in place. So this takes care of all the requirements that the building department requires. Any wall over 4 feet, you have to have a fence or this guardrail. So we meet the building requirements, and structurally it's sound. And again, when it goes back out, it goes to a structural engineer, and I will work with him to make sure it goes where it's supposed to go. And the radiuses on the curves are all good. And I don't know if Al, if you're able to
Al, you're muted. Can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, normally, so when you do a wall, first of all, the wall is designed by a structural engineer through the manufacturer before we even start the wall. He tells us what block goes where in order to support the weight that's pushing up against it. That said, so when we take and build a wall, we basically reach in from the side. We normally go 6 inches beyond the block. We dig it down on an average anywhere from 6 inches to 18 inches, depending on the grade of the block as we're going around the corner of the existing grade. And then we take and put a bed of stone, put the block on top of that. And then we reach over the 6 inches and we fill it back in with loam or whatever. These blocks are all filled up with stone on the inside because they're hollow like a cement block, and you turn it on the side all the way up. These are all filled up with stone for drainage, and the top we normally cover with like 4 inches of loam, or sometimes we just leave the stone exposed, depending who wants what. That's all.
And can I just pipe up on the east side of the property? We're like we have maybe 3 feet between the property line and the edge of the wall, and that isn't an issue for you to construct it.
No, not at all. Because we'll be on the interior of the property as we work. We never go out near the wetlands at all. We reach in with the machine. We only go 6
while I ask this question. So do you need any access on the exterior of that, for instance, for operations and maintenance? A footpath or anything on the wetland side of it?
No, you will never, ever go down there for any reason. Those blocks will never move. Those blocks weigh anywhere from 6,000 to 9,000 pounds apiece. And they're not going to move. We never maintain this. This wall is maintenance free. So basically all you're going to do is on the top of the wall, you might mow some grass at the very top under the guardrail, but that'd be about it. We never have
Okay,
any
so
reason
there's no
to
chance of the stone becoming dislodged and having to be replaced. So you don't need access on that side. Okay.
Not at all.
Okay.
You'll never be down there for any reason. We've done a lot of projects, Sullivan Toyota, 13-foot high walls, probably 600 or 800 feet long. And they don't have any problems at all there. There is not a wetland situation like this, but they still have the parking area. None of those blocks move. So it's, like I say, they're pretty heavy blocks. That's the reason why this wall works, because it's so heavy. The blocks are heavy.
So just I had one quick follow-up.
Sort of I guess it's the southwest corner, there was approximately, I want to say 12 to 1,300 square feet of encroachment of the paved parking lot area into the 200-foot riverfront. And again, I watched it, I wasn't present, but you spent a fair amount of time at your meeting on the 13th, commissioners did, raising concerns about that encroachment, suggesting that could maybe be eliminated, and then talking about the difficult test, that alternatives analysis that's required to establish that was a necessity. We are required, you might remember when this project was first proposed both to the Planning Board and to the Conservation Commission, it was proposed with 155 and then 147 parking spaces. And we're down to 100 now. This is obviously an Amazon parking lot, that's no secret. And Amazon has indicated they can't go below 100. And so we've been trying to work with the parameters they provided to us in terms of minimum number of parking spaces, as well as minimum aisle corridors, width of aisle corridors, and turning radii and so forth, to try to fit this in. We were concerned that we were going to be unable to do that without encroaching into the 200 feet. What ultimately saved us, and Bob can speak to this probably better than I can because I'm not an engineer, but what ultimately saved us is you might remember that a number of parking spaces in this area here, sort of toward the center of the site, were EV spaces. They had EV mechanics that were going to be placed on the ground for those electric vehicles. Well, in later discussions with Amazon as part of our discussion of overall development of the site and the issues we were facing with the Planning Board and with the Conservation Commission, it was determined that they're not going to be utilizing this site for EV vehicles. And so they indicated to us that they did not want those EV parking spaces. They did not require them. They asked us to remove the EV mechanics that were going to be placed in that area. And in doing so, we were able to condense those spaces because now we have spaces wide enough for the parking of vehicles and vans, but not wide enough to accommodate both the vehicle or van and the EV equipment. So by elimination of that, those EV spots, we were able to condense the overall parking area.
If I may, you do see an irony in this, I hope, that everyone, that what we're the reason we do this is to conserve our environment, and yet you've just taken out the vehicles which are the best for the environment. So this may be a case where you're doing the due diligence to the letter of the law, but it's a pity that you have to remove the places where the electric vehicles might have been parked.
I will tell you the irony is not lost on me. I was involved in a project not long ago on the municipal side where land was being deforested for a solar project, and we had a similar debate about the offset of loss of forest land for the purpose of creating a green energy project. So the irony is not lost on me. I will tell you, we did not go to Amazon and say we have to eliminate the EV parking spaces because we have to condense the lot. It just happened as part of the global discussion that we were talking about different alternatives for trying to eliminate the riverfront encroachment, use of the site, the necessity for 100 spaces, whether they would be using all of those spaces. And they indicated to us as part of that overall discussion that they did not require and would not be using this site for EV charging. Now, with that said, we also recognize, and we've had this conversation internally, that, we don't know what the future holds, but all indications so far are that we're turning away from fossil fuels and we're turning toward hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles. And so if in 15 years, the reality is that all of these vehicles are EV vehicles, they may have to restripe the lot and widen the spaces and reduce the overall number of parking spaces on the lot to accommodate that. But for current purposes, what we're being told by Amazon is they're not going to use this site for EV parking and to eliminate those. And that had the added benefit of allowing us to move the pavement outside of the riverfront setback, riverfront buffer.
Well, on the other, I'd like to just add that they have a site in Kingston, right on the Kingston-Plymouth line. And I went over there just to see how they set up the parking lots and how they did the charging stations. And they only had a handful of vans there. They're made by Rivian. And again, they're 7'4" wide. I measured it 20.5 feet long, and they just had a handful. I think there's a problem just manufacturing them. They're not going to have a lot of them out yet. So I think that's maybe that's part of their decision why they decided not to do that. So anyway, and I don't know if all the bugs are out of them quite yet anyway.
So it appears to me this is the older plan. Is there any way we can share the newer plan that was just sent over recently?
Oh, the newer plan looks just like
this is now the newer plan.
Yes.
The only change on this plan, if you want to go to it, that's fine. It just shows the snow storage area, and there's a snow storage area up around the there it is there. The snow storage around the dumpster area, and then off of where the right in that area where he's circling the snow storage area. Also, if they don't have a full 100, if we have a storm and they don't have the parking lot full, we would also store snow at the bottom of Florida there, and again, it's not going off-site. It's it grades towards the catch basin as you can see on sheet 4.
And that was an omission from our plans when we were last before you as well. We didn't have snow storage areas shown in these locations. We didn't have the dumpster pad either, which was a question I think by one of the commissioners. So that's been added as well. Correct. And for what it's worth, Amazon has represented, and I think I'm going to get this right, but I know that Barb Fitzgerald had the direct conversation and she's on the meeting tonight, so she can interrupt me and correct me if I'm wrong. But I think the representation, and I'm fairly certain I have it in an email in writing, was that Amazon intends to regularly use about 60 of these spaces. They need the overflow. They need parking for pedestrian vehicles, the drivers of these vans, to be able to come on site and park. You don't want a situation where they're coming on site, the site is full of vans. They have to park in the aisle while they pull their van out of their space, leave their van in the aisle while they then pull their passenger vehicle into the space. That's not how it's intended to operate. So there's going to be a degree of turnover in the site. So we do anticipate that there will be some vacant spaces in the winter season that can be utilized for snow storage if excess snow storage becomes a necessity.
I have a quasi environmental question. Are there going to be, we have anti-idling regulations in Massachusetts, 5 minutes. Are there going to be signs posted for the drivers? Because I assume, I mean, if I was living here, I wouldn't want people warming up their vans for 15 minutes, you know, pulling in with their car, sitting in their car, firing up the van and sitting there with, you know, 200 vehicles going at once.
That's,
Anybody asked for that on the planning board? Sorry.
So the planning board has, to my knowledge, not asked, but in fact, we inquired over the past week with Amazon about what internal signage they're going to have. Your zoning bylaw doesn't regulate internal signage that's not visible from the public way, but we inquired as to what signage would exist, and they sent us some examples of internal signage they have on their other lots. And one of the examples they sent us was a non-permanent, it's on a weighted base, 12-inch by 18-inch no idling zone signs that they put throughout the site to ensure that there's no idling, or to remind their employees that there's no idling. So yes, the answer to that question is yes, they will have internal signage to that effect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And so you have to wrap up with the planning board tomorrow. Are you expecting any changes? Did you want to leave this open tonight?
So we're not expecting changes. In fact, I think to a certain degree, it's been kind of the other way around, where the planning board has wanted to be sure that we've satisfied conservation with respect to layout. Indeed, if we had closed this out a month ago at the planning board, and then we shrunk the footprint, we would have had to go back and amend our site plan and our special permit. So our hope, our objective was to come back before you tonight, eliminating the need for the alternatives analysis, eliminating the encroachment into the 200-foot riverfront, addressing all the details of snow storage and dumpster and wall detail, and hopefully, get you to close out the public hearing and to vote, understanding it'll take some time before an order is fashioned, so that we can go to the planning board tomorrow night and represent that this is the final plan. Really, all that's outstanding at the planning board is we're not meeting the planning board's or the zoning bylaws landscaping requirements. They have requirements concerning internal landscaping of these islands. So the size of the islands wouldn't change. This corner island here, this corner island here, these tiny peninsulas. If this were a parking lot that was adjacent, let's say, to a retail shopping plaza, you'd be required to place trees or shrubbery in those locations. We've not proposed any. We've proposed a landscape buffer at the front of the site, but nothing internal. So we had to request waivers from those. We also have prepared a more robust landscape plan for the front buffer between South Washington Street and the site. So really, they wanted to see that final version, and that's where their focus has been on that. And they've asked some questions about traffic circulation, which I think we mostly addressed at their meeting back on the 28th.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions from either members of the commission or John Thomas? And if not, we can see if there are any questions among members of the audience. So the final decision, not seeing any questions, we can consider either to close or to continue and then close next time, although I don't think there are any specific issues now to be resolved. So
we're asking them for any additional information, John Thomas, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, they sent over some revised plans to me. I just need to know which sheets basically they revised.
sheet 3, it just,
Sheet 3? Okay.
it just showed the snow removal. I just
Okay, so
relabeled those.
I'll just make the note in the any sort of issued order or anything like that, or just make note of that in reference that sheet 3 was revised.
And really, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, Bob, that the only changes on sheet 3 were the addition of the snow storage, as well as the 4th handicap or ADA accessible parking space that the planning board had requested, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, and I have a question about a sheet labeled sheet 8, which is entitled photometric plan, and I don't really quite understand what it is. Out of ignorance, I just was wondering
it shows the light emanating from each light, and it just
Right.
shows it's
So photometric is
it's like a topographic map. It's the same amount of I'm not using the right illumination at that level, and we need to get at least 1 foot candle of light on the lot, and so it shows how much light is thrown down onto the lot.
That was the requirement under the planning board, was it not?
Yep. Yes, it was. Yeah.
Typically, the planning board will look at the outskirts of the property beyond the footprint, and you want to see all these 0.0 foot candles indicating that there's no spill or glare onto adjacent properties. But obviously, internal to the site, you want to see, as Bob pointed out, a number that is at least 1 to indicate that there's at least 1 foot candle and sufficient illumination for public safety.
All right, got it. Thank you. So the final decision is close versus continue and close. Is there a preference? I mean, John, you would have an order of conditions ready regardless of the
I should have a order of conditions drafted up, ready for review by the commission at the next meeting.
Well, we're not asking them for any additional information, so I would make a motion to close the public hearing for file 250-1119.
We have a motion made by Lisa and seconded by? Seconded by Ron. So roll call vote, beginning with Lisa and Ron.
Aye.
And Mark and Dan.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye, so the motion carries. The hearing for file number 250-11190 South Washington Street is closed, and we will be deliberating about and voting on an order of conditions next time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you for coming in.
All right. Our next item on the agenda is draft minutes for March 13th.
I actually have an update. I received a request for a partial COC for 131 John Scott Boulevard, Megan? Can't remember the address.
Yep, 131 John Scott.
So I went out there today. The visual barrier was in. The site is temporarily stabilized, and they are just waiting to get a final COC when they put in the pool. They're not ready to do that yet. So they're just waiting to put in the pool so that when they put in the pool, they will be coming in for a final COC.
So I'll make a
All right, so
motion
then-
to partial.
Well, if we have a partial, we'll have to do a bond. Is that right? So are they looking for a partial and a bond?
They're just looking for a partial. Do you want to put in a bond?
Well, I mean, I don't feel a bond is necessary. I mean, is it the owner who's requesting the?
Yeah, the owner's requesting a partial COC, so that way they can get a certificate of occupancy.
I see.
What they want to do is they're not going to put in the pool yet because they don't have the funds to do so as of yet, but they don't want to close out the COC because they want to keep that permit open. So the only remaining item on the agenda is for them to put that pool in, but they want to keep it going.
All right.
So I told them that I'm comfortable with that because the site's stabilized and they have everything else that we've asked them to do. It's just more so, giving them the luxury of putting in the pool within the next 3 years.
Yeah, and if it were a developer, there would be a need for a bond. But if it's the owner, they're
It's the
not
owner,
going to
yeah.
leave. So I don't see the necessity of a bond.
So
Do we have a file number on that one?
250-1085,
Yes.
131 John Scott. I'll make a motion to issue a partial
Second.
certificate.
We have a motion made by Lisa, seconded by Mark, and we'll begin with Ron and Lisa.
Aye.
And Mark and Dan.
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll throw in an aye. So the motion carries partial certificate of compliance is issued. And now we have the minutes of March 13th. I made no note of any changes that I would make. Anybody else have comments?
I have comments on the section dealing with 250-1123. The very bottom line of those minutes says setbacks. Now, is that terminology for, does that sound right to you?
It's a
Okay,
term.
that's
Yeah, it's a
that's
term.
fine. That's fine with me then.
It's one word, setbacks.
Okay, no, I wasn't questioning the spelling of the word. Am I missing some terminology? Is that special engineering terminology for something, or?
Buffer.
It's really zoning driven
Yeah,
by
zoning.
zoning. Usually there's a setback or an offset, same word, right? You have to be so many feet or so much distance from one object to the next, it's a setback.
That was just, thank you.
Okay.
That was just something I saw today, or I would have, anyway, the one other thing is, let's see, on file 250-1119, and this is going to be 6 lines from the bottom. This is just a minor point, but after the and, it should read, or please change it to, its proximity to sensitive area, comma. And the main thing is changing the semicolon to a comma.
Are we on the second page of that?
I believe that's the second page. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So the only comments I had on this one, and it seems to be missing, is my comment, and they actually didn't even need to address this, but it should probably go in the minutes, about that not all the parking spaces have to be the same size, and they should look at some larger spaces and then, decreasing the spaces of others. I just didn't see that here.
Okay, I can add that in. I believe I had mentioned in there that you had them research shrinking the lot in general, but not that specification.
Oh, yeah, because I said not all, I don't remember much, but I remember this, because they said we have to increase the size of all the spaces, and I thought, well, no, it's not an all or nothing, right? You can increase the space of some of them, but it doesn't have to be every single one of them. I do remember saying that.
Yeah, unfortunately, in terms of operating such a lot, I think they probably would shy away from that.
Well, no, it's just the same thing as a
operator.
parking garage in downtown Boston that has, small.
Yeah,
compact
small cars
spaces.
only, I understand.
Yeah.
But
So anyway.
they-
Yeah, I'll be
They
sure to
have-
add that.
Okay.
All right, any further comments on the minutes of March 13th?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as discussed.
All right, we have a motion made by Lisa and seconded by?
Second.
Seconded by Ron. Roll call vote, starting with Ron and Lisa,
Aye.
Aye.
and Mark and Dan.
Aye.
Okay, and I'll throw in an aye, and the motion carries. The minutes are accepted as discussed and modified. And we are now up to report from staff and everything else under old new business. What do we got?
I don't have much. I'm looking for a member of the Conservation Commission to volunteer their time and effort to be on the Open Space Committee that I'm going to basically reinstilling. So if anyone wants to volunteer or raise their hand, I'd really appreciate it.
To do what, John?
to be a member of the Open Space Committee.
How often do they meet?
Not very often, because there's only one member on the one active member. Eugene Blood used to be on the Open Space Committee, so.
I was on it for about a year, but I was terrible. So
Well, I was on the stormwater committee and we're not meeting anymore, so I guess I could do it.
So I'll throw it out to Tama because I know she likes to do this stuff too. So
Okay.
I'll just keep it in mind. And I'll just let you guys pull straws maybe.
Well, if Tama doesn't want to do it, I'll do it.
Okay.
If none of them want to do it, I'll do it.
All right. So there you go.
I'll be
All
your,
right.
That's easy of them.
your option C.
I am not going to volunteer, sorry.
Try to sell her on it, John.
Okay. All
Right?
right.
Just
I'll-
give her the weepy.
John,
No one
have you-
else wanted to do it.
have you thought about pestering past members?
I have not thought about pestering past members, Dan, but I did hear a rumor that I can bring up with you tomorrow. Okay. When I was in the office, I'll talk to you tomorrow about it. Okay.
All right.
I have nothing else to report though. Everything's going good. Looking at potential opportunities. This is why I brought up the Open Space Committee. I'm looking at evaluating properties here in town and seeing what we can do with them, trying to get them more foot traffic if we can, and trying to utilize them in a way that's going to serve the public and residents here in town and not just sit there and hopefully have some use, whether they're for bird watching, whether they're for enthusiasts that want to basically take a stroll with their dog or take a stroll with their kids. It's definitely something to look at, especially with the rail trail coming in. We're looking to see kind of what we can do for connections. Trail continuity has always been a thing of my, knack. I've always had a knack for it. So I'll be looking at, taking that endeavor on at some point. So just looking for volunteers and people that want to, give back to the community to try to, appreciate and give back with open space preservation and protection, but also provide recreational values.
So John, you're referring to parcels that are already under our belt with regard to conservation space.
So those parcels, then other town parcels that are held in open space protection, to see kind of what we can do with them. I've been talking a lot with the town manager, the Parks and Rec director, on how we can really, afford, basically making them more, usable for the public. And, just seeing kind of what we have currently that's going to be fairly inexpensive to just completely give them, a new makeover, a new overhaul that, really doesn't cost much. And that's kind of what we're going to look at first. And then for, whether we want to put in associated parking for areas that we think are sufficient for having trailheads and things of that nature, that's going to come down with grants and funding and all that kind of stuff in the future. So, obviously that's kind of what I'm looking towards doing a lot for the community. And, that's what I'm spending kind of my free time doing as well on the weekends. So.
Yeah, I don't feel quite so pressured for having that space utilized by humans because it is utilized by a lot of wildlife now. And in terms of the deer, the fox populations, and here on the reservoir, we have eagles that fly around fairly frequently. I think they're a nesting pair nearby. So, and the herons. So there is wildlife in those areas that do enhance the experience of people living adjacent to those areas. So I don't feel that they're going unused right now as far as quality of life improvement in town. But I think improving access, that's fine. But I don't feel it's a resource being lost right now.
Yeah, I think the fishing access is completely lost. You see people on the side of the road with nowhere to stand. And the access at the dam. Somebody pretends that that street is not public, and it's driving me crazy that we need a sign there. That person asked me to leave once, and I had to remind her that I was standing on a public way and it wasn't her property, so that the average person would be completely intimidated for access. So I think that's a huge issue in town with fishing rights and access and space to do it safely. But if I'm part of the open space committee, John Thomas, that's what I'm going to go for, because I see it every day.
You know, John, if you really want to increase the number of people using these public spaces, what we need to do is find a cryptozoological animal somewhere in the woods, you know, like the Norton swamp beast or something like that.
Well, I have a cat here who's fascinated by the computer, so
That could work.
that could work.
Cat of
So let's talk about something
Julian's
really
magic cat.
exciting. Megan, what do you do? When's your due date?
April 13th.
Ooh, it's coming up.
Oh yeah, I'm ready
When are you going to work? How late are you going to work? How long?
until I can't.
Until John Thomas carries you out.
Oh, they'd have to get me in the elevator.
All right. Well, if we don't talk to you, good luck.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, good luck, Megan.
I'm thinking about it.
I'm sure John will do a great time delivering, a great job delivering your baby because you haven't left.
I mean, the fire department's right there. They're my backup.
That's true. Right next door. Just knock on the door. That's
Exactly.
good.
Like, can I have some help, please?
You don't even have to go to the hospital.
No, I can go right back to work.
Right at your desk and just go back to work. There you
So
go.
in other news, I don't know if anyone's heard, but the public meeting, virtual until 2025. So we're just waiting for that.
Yeah.
We're waiting for that to get signed by Governor Healy. So hopefully we'll get word on that this week.
And John, I guess MACC, I just caught this in Joey Wiggleworth's email, reissued BBW delineation manual and a replication manual.
I
have no idea.
did not see that, so I
Yeah,
have to.
DEP issued it to this week or last
Okay.
week.
I'll have to take a look.
Okay.
Kudos to Lisa for always going to the MACC meetings.
That's right. That's right. Dan, how's it conservation bylaw coming? How's the bylaw coming?
Did somebody make a motion to adjourn or?
I think I heard that.
Oh, you're not ready to talk about it. Tell us when you are then. Okay. The one thing I did want to mention is I think we were going this way right before Jen left, and that is, and we haven't seen a lot of these lately, but administrative approvals for tree removal and septic systems that don't really need to come before us John can filter those to see if they're outside of the flood zone, outside of, maybe in the buffer zone, in riverfront, needs to be done.
So how formal does that have to be? Can it be?
In some towns I've been to, they just ask you to fill out a one-pager, so they have it in their file, right? So it's de minimis. They want to take down a couple of trees, they want to do borings, they want to fix their septic system. It really doesn't warrant a public hearing and, all that expense. John goes, does a site inspection and says, yep, it's de minimis, they're going to restore the area, if we have it on file, and he can administratively approve it. I don't know how you feels about that.
How complicated is it to deputize John to do that?
Well,
Is
he's
it
already
just-
doing it. Well, I'll let you speak, John, but you mentioned you were already doing it for those sites that under the stormwater bylaw,
For
right?
those projects that are not in the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction, I'm already doing that through a stormwater application. And then, for instance, if it does require, then it goes to the planning board or some other agent or our issuing authority for review. But anything less than 20,000 square feet usually is administrative approval.
Yeah.
in land disturbance.
Yeah.
It's called a small scale land disturbance or
Yeah.
low scale land disturbance.
So I've
No.
seen before a few towns lately where the agent just takes care of it. They say, okay, fill out this one pager. We're going to administratively approve it. It's de minimis. This was like for borings in pavement where we're just going to repave it, no fill, nothing. She just approved it on paper. It didn't have to be, no, there's no legal advertisement. There's no public hearing. It's all just handled administratively. So I'm just throwing it out there. Not that we've seen a lot of septics, but I know sometimes we can get bogged down with them. And I also think it'll save Josie Blow homeowner, the cost of the legal ad and the public hearing and the paperwork. If it's de minimis, but just throwing it out there.
Well, I have no problem with that, but how do we put it in place?
Well, the interesting thing is I didn't know until I went and talked to the agent at this one town and explained to her what I was doing. And she just said, oh, you just need to fill out this piece of paper. So I think it's all going to have to start with John, and he's going to have to filter it to figure out whether it warrants a file.
I guess the issue is, does Bear even have a bylaw?
I would have to see if that, but it wasn't, in other words, it wasn't part of the bylaw that said we can administratively approve things. She just kind of mentioned it like out of the blue, and I'm like, oh, okay, fantastic. Like, we're leaving on their website. I had no idea. I just called her up to ask her a question. So, I don't know.
Here's where it becomes interesting is that I review wetland lines. I can flag wetland lines too. I can do it all. So I know kind of where wetland is. So I can confirm the boundary and understand whether the project's within 100 feet of said BBW.
Mm-hmm.
And I can also make that suggestion that, is it going to have negative impacts to the resource area or the buffer zone? Of course, I can make that determination. I guess the question is, if I feel in my nature that the project will impose those sort of negative impacts, then they would need to file. Most of the time, that's not the case because a lot of the projects that require my review that don't come before the commission are outside their jurisdiction or outside your jurisdiction.
Yeah, the only question is whether abutters would be concerned of things being glossed over without a public hearing process, even with regard to a septic system repair. That would be the only question. Although, administratively, I think the abutters would be happier with a functioning septic system next door than one that is not repaired.
I mean, just thinking back of all the septic repairs we've ever had, I don't know if we've really had any comments from the public, but I don't know, John, maybe it's just something on the website that says before you undertake a project, coordinate with the agent to determine whether your project can be administratively approved or something, or I don't know, something to that effect. But I
mean, currently we say that if you're going to do anything, contact the office to ensure that the project's not within the conservation jurisdiction or requires any sort of approvals through the Conservation Commission. So I can make that change and say that, that they wouldn't just need to contact us for any proposed site work on their property.
I mean, I think the first activity that may fit into that category, Julian, might be like tree cutting. When people damage, and Jennifer would go out and say, okay, these are the trees to be tagged. And we didn't have to do a public hearing for a few trees coming down that were already damaged, right? And that's how she handled those things administratively. So, I mean, maybe the septic is a stretch, but
but certainly if we think in terms of if somebody has a tree that comes down already, then it's maintenance, so they can clean it up without a hearing process. But if it's still standing, you're saying that too could be a form of maintenance that we don't necessarily have to have a public hearing about.
Exactly. Just food for thought.
Well, I would certainly entertain some kind of a policy statement about what what would fit into the criteria of administrative approval, and we could bring it up for review and a vote.
Yeah.
That's something you would want to put together, John?
I can most certainly put something together as suggested by Lisa, and see if that jives with what kind of everybody else's thoughts towards that.
Yeah, I think it was some of the septic system repair. It's going to be kind of iffy because there are so many old septic systems that need to be brought up to standard for meeting, Title V during a house sale, and
Yeah,
Take
13
controls and-
Dean Street 1 needed a notice of intent, so that's exactly what they're doing. And that one's going to be in front of us. So that one's kind of one that I just felt that they needed to file a notice of intent for because of the sensitivity. So, I think it's going to be a case by case basis as we move forward with a lot of these projects as to kind of what the existing system is, what the proposed system is it at the same location? Is it a complete upgrade? Is it
It potentially becomes a hairball, because if you have somebody who goes rogue and they said, well, you told me I could do this, and then,
right. And that kind of, then for instance, typically what I would require from them, if any septic repair, upgrade, or any project, would be an actual formal site plan, that shows me exactly what they're doing. And it's required for Title V anyway. And the Board of Health requires an actual site plan, so they're going to have to show it anyway. So regardless, we're going to get a plan for any sort of septic project, even if it's not in conservation jurisdiction. I still get them, and I look at them, I review them, I screen them, just to make sure that they're actually not in conservation jurisdiction. So I do all this work already. It's more so with allowing, I guess, the commission the luxury of not having to see these, surplus of permit applications, RDAs, unless there's something that may potentially be more sensitive, like the one I identified previously.
Yeah. Well, I think it also saves the applicant, the homeowner, one, another step, another fee, another set of fees, another legal ad, or, just a septic repair.
No, I agree. I think tree removal that is not in a sensitive area, and the septic repairs that might go 5 feet into the buffer zone are administrative, material that could be administratively dealt with.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to make more work for you, John, at all. I just thought it could, make our nights shorter on some of those nights where we have very contentious ones and we have to deal with the smaller ones. And if we could just handle it administratively, life is good.
Well, the luxury is that we're all going to be digital until 2025. So,
Yeah.
I have, actually, I want to sort of answer Lisa's question earlier about the bylaw, and to say that I think it's my concerns are more a matter of zoning and maybe planning. I simply don't want any building in the center of town unless it is someone who already lives here or something that is going to contribute to the, I won't say image, but for lack of a better word, to the feel of the town. I'd like it to become a college town. It's not a college town right now. It's a town with a college in it. And I think becoming a college town could give it an identity.
You're on the wrong board, Dan. You got to go on the planning board, dude.
Well, Dan, we can have a conversation about that tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I will probably be at the planning board meeting tomorrow night. So anyway, there it is.
That's a planning board issue. Character of the town, maintaining the character. Yep.
And well, also not building anywhere near a wetland. In fact, not even
Well-
100 feet away, 300 feet away, unless there's already a towns, there are too many people, but anyway.
Dan, like,
Already.
you sound NIMBY-ish.
I
Yeah,
sound,
NIMBY-ish, not in my backyard, but the
Oh,
difficulty.
got it, NIMBY, yes.
The difficulty is, equal opportunity for everybody. And just because you live here or somebody has lived here doesn't mean that you can preclude anybody from having a place to live or having a place to live here. It just.
Well, I want them to have a place to live, but you see, I agree with you, Julian. I think we should uphold laws and so on and so forth, but at the same time, there's a quality of life issue. And if we
there
put
is a
in
quality
another
of life
gas,
issue. I don't know. I think putting it down on paper to improve a town is something that you're not going to be able to do.
But I think small.
I've already
steps-
done it. I just haven't published it yet.
I
There are
think
20
small-
pages of it.
But just remember of the law of unintended consequences
Yeah.
whenever you put things down on
Well,
paper.
that's why I haven't published it yet, because one never knows. With my luck, it would be something that I never would consider would annoy anyone, and that would be the worst thing in the world, But you're
No,
right, Julian. Thank you. Wise
There's
words.
just a few items, Dan, where there's, some gaps in the regs that we could cover locally. There's probably a handful of things, and that's it. That should probably be in a bylaw. It doesn't have to be this long, arduous thing. It's probably a list of 5 or 6 items that could just tighten it up and help us administer the regs a little better and have a little bit more control over it. That's all. Nothing major from my viewpoint.
Yeah, I think the main difficulty is dealing with people that want to come into town, develop a spot, sell it to somebody, and then leave town and forget about it.
Yeah.
They do not have the long-term interest of the residents of the town at heart.
Yeah.
And those are some of the problem cases that we've been up against.
But even if people do care, I mean, that there's a question of what that, I mean, if you care and you bring in a gas station or something like that, I mean, you might care wonderfully much about people in town, but we don't need another gas station or more of this urban sprawl. Even though we're not urban, we can still have sprawl, unfortunately. And it does nothing for the town. Unless it's, I won't belabor this because I know it's outside our jurisdiction, but
Well, it could be in our
place like-
jurisdiction, Dan. We just don't know yet.
We could make the entire town open space.
Or just
well, that's what we should do. Anyway, O'Brien's Restaurant. If somebody wants to put something in town, let them knock down O'Brien's Restaurant and build something there. It seems obvious to me. If
Who's
they want to put a
O'Brien?
gas station or,
it's redevelopment first, Dan, right? It's redevelopment instead of new development. Exactly. And that's why you need to run for planning board.
I will do that.
You should.
I will do that. I will have to do it as a write-in, but I will do it.
Dan, we
Yeah.
don't have to have a conversation tomorrow
Okay, all right.
because you just admitted it. Okay, thank you.
I will, good. So vote for me. I'll be writing my name in as a writing candidate.
All right.
I will do that.
And Dan, you are more than qualified to do that, and you have every right to do that. And you actually can do that because of the appointment and also the elected position. So kudos to you. Good luck. I wish you the best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. We got a motion to close at 8:10. I'll make it.
So moved.
All right. I'm not gonna ask for a vote. I don't know how it'll go.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Hey, everyone.